We're providing a mechanism to bring in a much larger set of people in a game that has historically been dominated and rigged by Wall Street.
We have never asked for any favors of like that, and he has never done anything or any regulatory ask, nothing like that.
Is it fair to say that the Trump family has a financial interest in prediction markets being legal? Tarek, Luana, welcome to the Axios Show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Prediction markets are in the zeitgeist right now, whether it's politics or sports or finance or tech. Luana, let me ask you, what's the one sentence explanation for why America needs prediction markets?
Well, prediction markets are, think about like the stock market where you can buy yes or no shares of what's going to happen in the future. And one of the most interesting things about prediction markets are the data that come from these markets, right? You have the best way to forecast and take a look at the future and forecast the events. And in a world nowadays with this amount of polarization, fake news, misinformation, all of that, it's very important to have an unbiased source of information that can help you see and kind of decrease the uncertainty about so many events that's going to happen in the future.
What's an example, a specific example that you've heard from a user perhaps of somebody making a decision or maybe a different decision because of something they learned from the data in Kalshi?
Well, this applies to both like people, but also like businesses and institutions, even governments. And I mean, there's a whole suite of examples. The Fed put out a paper, and the TLDR of the paper is essentially, well, this is the most accurate gauge that we have on where the economy is going. And that kind of feeds into all of our decisions about, Fed interest rates, about like where, Fed policy should basically go. And then you can apply that. I mean, there's a lot of simple examples like, will the midterms go Republican or Democrat? There's very clear impact to businesses or people on, depending on what they do based on sort of a change of control. And so having an accurate gauge of what's going to happen, I think helps you make better decisions, right? The easiest way to kind of visualize this is like, we're making the world a little bit smarter about what's going to happen in the future. And that's worth a lot.
Well, what's the easiest way for someone who's never downloaded Kalshi on their phone and never actually looked at it? Maybe they've heard of it, maybe they haven't. How do you describe the product itself? Not the purpose that you guys have been talking about, but how do you best describe the product?
The best analogy, I think, is really thinking about the stock market. When you go to the stock market, you believe Apple is going to become even bigger than it is today. You can buy shares of Apple. And then if you believe, it's not going to go well, you can sell those shares. Or you think if you already made a profit. What you can think about is that you can actually do the exact same activity, but any future event. So for example, who's going to win who's going to take the Senate, right? If you believe the Democrats are going to take the Senate, you can buy a yes share and hold that. And then that's going to have market fluctuations, the price going up and down. You can sell in the middle. So if it goes up 10%, you're like, that's enough, I want to sell or cash out. Or you're going to wait till settlement where you can make or lose money there. So the same way to think about it is really a financial market that you're trading shares.
So basically, you're making financial wagers on future events, a market for events. Mm-hmm. Why isn't that gambling?
That question that you just asked was consistently asked at every new turn of financial instruments. Back when the stock market, there's a lot of speculation. The South Sea bubble, they're like, well, retail participation, there's a lot of gambling in those markets. Now I think society has come to terms that like it's not actually, there is speculation, yes, but like there's all these other kind of uses. Grain futures actually went all the way to Supreme Court in the early 1900s, and there was a question about gambling versus not gambling there as well. But, what I always say is like, let's just be precise about definition. What do we mean when we say gambling? So some people are actually referring to speculation. We've been hearing a lot of this argument of like, it's squawk like a duck, and people are talking about ducks these days.
A lot of ducks.
Yeah, but the law is not ducks, right? The way that we should make decisions is not based on ducks.
Guys, you're right. Okay, I get that. Is it not then a loophole? In other words, if I'm sitting in California right now, we're in New York, but if I was sitting in California right now, I can't bet on tonight's Celtics game. I'm not allowed on DraftKings or FanDuel or any of those sports books. I can't walk into a casino and do it. It's illegal. However, I can do it on Kalshi. For the end user, what's the difference? I understand the back end is different. It's a contract as opposed to a bet. But in the end, I'm betting on the Celtics to win a game, and I'm going to win or lose based on what happens on the court.
So look, I mean, on the loophole question, if our goal was to kind of like shortcut the process, we did a very bad job at that because we started coming
$22 billion or something like that.
Well,
that's a pretty good job.
Well, we did a good job building a company, but my point is, we spent 4 to 5 years upfront getting regulated.
Yeah.
Without a product. So we're a company that's like regulated at the federal level, They have a federal license for an exchange, a clearinghouse. Those are extremely hard to get. And now that we are so successful, a lot of companies are trying to get them. And they're seeing how hard they are to get and operate. It's a bit like a bank. So if our goal was to short circuit the process, we did a pretty bad job. We should, ideally we would have gone offshore and launched the product fast. So no, the answer is no. And to your question, like, and going back to the sort of, is this gambling question? The mechanic of how this thing happened is critical, right? There is state-regulated insurance, where you go to an insurance company and ask them for insurance. And then there's like federally regulated hedging, which is you're basically putting on a hedge in an open market where your counterparty could be anybody. Anyone can compete for that thing that you want to buy.
Guys, I'm curious, the reason why certain states, and this isn't always true, but the reason why certain states have made sports betting, gambling, whatever you want to call it, illegal, and the reason why some of them have sued Kalshi, and there's currently litigation. I know you just won a case in New Jersey in the last several hours. But one of the reasons they've done it isn't so much because they feel the casinos or the sports books are taking advantage of their users because they're betting against their users. It's because they think it is a social ill for people to be betting. Period. Technically, it's illegal for, two people to make a $10 bet on a game of golf.
Mhm.
Same argument, right?
There's always the two sides. There's the legal side, which Tarek talked about, but also there's the kind of ethical side. The problem is it's very hard to change or convince consumers to not do certain things. So all you're doing is you're pushing this activity offshore. You're pushing this activity to unsafe where you don't know who the traders are. You don't have any protections. You don't have oversight.
You're saying that all very nicely as if you're not talking about a particular company. Go on.
Well, I think there are various offshore companies that are trying to do similar things. Of course, there's a bigger one that we all know. But I think that's kind of like a very big difference. You're just pushing activity offshore, but actually on the federal regulatory regime that we're saying, it's like everything is transparent. We know everyone that's trading on the platform.
You mentioned ducks earlier, and he didn't say ducks, but the one place so far you've lost legally is in Nevada, state that certainly knows a lot about gaming. You can argue why certain things are there. But what the judge said in giving an injunction, temporary injunction, at least right now against Kalshi, was basically, if I bet $100 on a basketball game through Kalshi or I do it in a sports book, it feels the same to me. It was the walks like a duck, talks like a duck argument. If Nevada, how can I put this? If Nevada is the state that kind of has the most experience with gaming, would you just argue regulatory capture there, or did he have a point?
I don't necessarily think there's like an advantage for like specific judges in specific states over their understanding of the federal law and the Commodities Exchange Act. So I wouldn't say that like, running casinos in Nevada necessarily correlates to experience with, knowing the law or knowing the federal law. So, and yes, like there's some, district judges.
There's one thing though, like in Nevada, obviously they have a lot of experience with casinos, and the CFTC chair who supports prediction markets being legal, supports federal framework, et cetera, said recently that when he was asked about this, he said, well, part of the difference is that when you walk into a casino, there's all sorts of entertainment, right? There might be shows, there's food, there's drink. Sure. Said, so betting in a casino is different than betting in Kalshi. But it's not necessarily different than betting on a sportsbook app on my couch. There's no entertainment difference.
There is a big fundamental difference. And look, I think the court pieces let the courts decide. We won a very big one, the first appeals court this morning, which I think is actually the most important signal where this is going in our view. But there's big fundamental differences. It goes back to the market mechanic. Like one of them is essentially a product that is designed for customers to lose. Actually, the proof of that is that, when a customer wins on a traditional sportsbook, they block that customer because those winnings are coming from the business model, the business itself.
If they win enough, yeah.
If they win enough. Or if they win, really, if they win and consistently, if they do research, if they get informed.
If they're good.
If they're good, exactly. And if they're not, actually you get them promos and you figure out how to bring them back. And there's kind of a bit of this sort of like, I think, what you call like kind of marketing tactics to bring these people back. It could be like entertainment or promos and so on and so forth. That does not exist in prediction markets. It is a fundamental difference in structure where actually a lot of the people that win, the people that are doing research, that are getting informed, that are traders, do come to prediction markets.
Does Kalshi track folks? It's one thing to not block big winners from continuing to be able to win or continue to be able to buy contracts. Do you do anything to stop people who have lost a lot from continuing to participate?
Yes.
What do you do?
We have things like self-exclusion, deposit limits, trade limits, exposure limits, all those things.
Are those things the person has to set themselves, or is that something that, do you ever look and say, this person is losing an enormous amount of money, we should stop them from hurting themselves?
We give them a lot of tools, and also we do push them in certain directions in the UI. We don't make decisions for them.
Which is the same in the States.
Which is the same in the States, and the same in we think it's about giving them the tools to act correctly, but we do a lot of it on our end on like we ban things that we can do. We stop marketing to people, as I said.
Well, that's interesting. So if I've lost a lot of money on Kalshi or I've stopped, using Kalshi, I won't keep getting Kalshi ads in my social feeds.
So, well, yeah. I mean, there's a few things here. And maybe like the why we do this.
Yeah.
Excessive speculation is existent in any financial market.
Sure.
It's true in sports betting. It's true in prediction markets. It's true in crypto. It's true in zero data expiry options, where you see a lot of people losing their homes on trading options that blow up in the given day. It's true really kind of in all the traditional products where retail has access. Retail is always heightened risk. And we take that very seriously. What we did is we looked at what federal law requires us, and we do that, which is there's a bunch of rules around that. We also looked at kind of some of the most stringent state requirements and looked at them and basically decided to apply the most stringent ones and go beyond that. So we, like Luana said, we have all these different tools. The marketing that we're mentioning is like essentially, no, you cannot, if you take a billboard or exist as a company, you cannot block that from, being shown to a person that has a problem. But we block them in our product. They cannot use the product anymore.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching the Axios Show. We're going to take a quick break to have a message from our sponsor.
When it's not always raining, there'll be days like this. When there's no one complaining,
You're good to me.
there'll be days like this. My mama told me
way faster.
there'll be days like this.
You guys recently preemptively blocked, I think it was athletes, politicians, I want to make sure I get this right, and quote, other relevant people is the term, from trading certain sports and politics markets. Had that been happening?
So we have a surveillance team, market integrity team that looks at every single market and looks at any weird trading behavior. And obviously we have the name, address, social security of every single person in the platform and look for anything that could be suspicious, start an investigation, because if federally regulated, you can end up in jail if you do something bad. That's also mimics what the stock market does. We took a step further, and basically what we're doing now is that if you even sign up to Kalshi and we think there could be an issue, you're blocked from certain markets, which is going way further than the stock
But
market.
had you prior to doing that, had you seen the people who you're now preemptively blocking, had you seen them trade on things that they shouldn't, that now they would be blocked from trading on?
One great example is when we put out an enforcement case actually a couple weeks ago on a candidate for governor, I think, of California that was trading on his own candidacy, and we had an investigation, fines, banned from the platform, and all of that. So we had cases of that, but they all were correctly got by the surveillance team and stopped the same way that it happens in the stock
Your surveillance, I'm just curious though, your company, you guys have what, about 150 employees total? Is that right? How big is the surveillance team?
I think it's 15% of that, 15, 16%.
How can that number, that relatively small number of people surveil, as you said, 16,000 contracts? So it's one thing to say, okay, that's the person on the basketball court, that's the candidate. But their spouses, their kids, their neighbors, their best friends. How can that small number of people surveil all of that and do it well?
Well, one, you can make that argument about the entire size of our company. How can our company writ large, achieve what we've achieved? And, I think we have like a great team, and AI is kind of like a big part of a lot of what's happening these days. But like, I think it's important so that, I think one way to kind of like answer it, like, yes, there are bad actors in any system. There are bad actors in the stock market. If I ask you today, like, how, do you think insider trading happens in the stock market sometimes?
It does.
But maybe like...
Although, can I say though, generally speaking, there's fewer people within the stock market who can actually make something happen. There's people who have inside information and know what's going to happen, which is different than being able to make the thing.
Well, there are like hundreds of thousands of people that work at big tech company, have cousins and they have relatives and they have sisters and friends and siblings, right?
But I'd also disagree that, for example, you could do something bad with a CEO of a company, and that would move the stock price. Actually, a lot of people are able to do certain, like...
I mean, the market manipulation and insider trading are constructs that have been defined way before prediction markets. And the reason they have been defined is because they have been a problem in traditional financial markets. Otherwise, why would we define them? It's not like market manipulation has started existing.
So as you said, so you're a small company able to do this. Do you know,
Yes. So
you do know those.
So there are a lot of lists for politicians, for sports and athletes and people that relate to them. And so those lists are very effective at flagging, like, Dan, who are you? Do you have heightened risk of, potential access to insider information? And if so, we can block you proactively from participating in the market.
Do you do the blocking? Do you refer to CFTC?
So here's the difference. We do surveillance after the trade. And when we find weird patterns, which is, again, usually you see it in the data, and sometimes our systems flag it, other times our community, like the traders, flag it, because, you can see that all of our data is transparent and public, which is a great way to kind of flag bad actors. And then we can punish people from fines to criminal prosecution. But we go a step beyond traditional markets and stock markets, which is we proactively block people that get flagged by these lists. Like, hey, you may be a politician, so you cannot trade on political markets that cannot be related to you.
Am I correct to say, so you've taken enforcement action? Am I correct, though? At least I looked. I couldn't find the CFTC itself having taken an action against an individual for insider trading on prediction markets.
So there are 3 steps here. The first step is...
Wait, am I wrong? Has that happened?
The CFTC has not done that.
Well, I mean...
But the SEC, but you brought up insider trading earlier. The SEC historically brings...
Absolutely, but prediction markets have not existed for 10 years.
But you've existed for the last year.
Sorry, but
been no
insider trading cases in the SEC, they don't get resolved in 6 months.
No, but they get brought often within a year.
I think it depends because there is due process. If you look at a rule book on Kalshi, and same with the CFTC rule book, and look, this is a question you should ask the regulators, but like sometimes we have cases and we have managed to put out 2, but it takes time because once we flag something, you cannot just tell the public, hey, this person did something bad. You have to go through a whole process. They can appeal that process. They have legal rights.
Would you expect that the CFTC will, based on what you know in terms of the communications, would you expect, say, within the next 12 months, there will be FTC cases brought insider trading?
We can't comment on what regulators will or will not do. What I would expect...
What if you were on Kalshi and there was a yes-no bet?
Yeah, I think yes, because my expectation is this is a large market. They're starting to look like a financial... there are cases that come in the stock market. There is no system basically... Any system will have bad actors. No system is perfect. Bad actors will try to attempt fraud, and they will do things that are bad. And what our job as an exchange and the job of regulators is over time, you flag these bad actors and detect and deter. You punish them when you find someone who did something bad. And inevitably in our markets, this is going to happen.
How do you think of this?
It should happen. It's a good thing.
Kalshi started under the Biden administration. I know the Trump administration has been much more friendly. The CFTC has been more friendly. You didn't sue the CFTC like you did the last one. However, Kalshi obviously hired Donald Trump Jr. as a paid advisor shortly after Inauguration Day. He has become an investor in Polymarket and is an advisor over there as well. Is it fair to say that the Trump family has a financial interest in prediction markets being legal and successful?
I mean, look, we just announced Stephanie Cutter as an advisor. She's helped, Democratic campaigns, and she was part of.
But Stephanie Cutter can't make law.
I don't think Don Jr. can make law either.
Let me rephrase. He has a much quicker direct line.
Look, I think
we have never asked for any favors of like that, and he has never done anything or any regulatory ask, nothing like that.
I mean, we obviously, what happened is essentially we're a company that's a small company that, all of a sudden won our lawsuit, which I think that was the most important thing that, you mentioned about the change in administration. Actually, the biggest change that happened in prediction markets is the fact that we won our lawsuit against the last administration in October 2024, before the election. That is the thing that redefined kind of the what is possible in prediction market. We've kind of set the law, and we've shown regulators that, whether the Biden administration or the Trump administration, if you disagree with us and we believe we're right on the law, we will ask a court to, rule on this thing. And this is true for any administration. And then, as a small company, we're very excited about, people on both sides of the aisle getting interest and having interest in our market and believing in the power of these markets. And that's basically what happened there. And, we have a number of Democratic advisors. We're going to balance on the two sides, because, as a financial company, we have to basically be able to work with policymakers and regulators. But we can say absolutely for sure, unequivocally, we have never asked, nor we would be able to ask anything on the regulatory front from Don.
I'm just curious. Then I'll just push on this for just 1 second. When you guys announced him, I just want to make sure I read this right. The press release said, and I don't know if it was either one of you who said it, but the press release said Don Jr. has, quote, always been at the forefront of these sorts of spaces and new technologies. I thought he was a real estate and hospitality guy.
Wisdom of the crowds, talking directly to people, going direct. And there's a rise. I mean, this goes back to the rise of distrust in traditional sources of information, as you know. There is a rise of distrust these days in mainstream media. There is a rise of distrust in even social media, actually, where people feel like news feeds are getting polarized, etc. And increasingly so, you're seeing founders and people, thought leaders, politicians, or others going going directly to consumers. Prediction markets is a form of that. Like when I think about, social media, they're kind of about going direct about the past. Prediction markets is a way to get informed about what's going to happen in the future through tapping directly into the crowd wisdom instead of like listening to pundits or listening to kind of quote unquote authority figures. That is the space that we're talking about.
Speaking of the future, if you look on Kalshi right now, Democrats are favored significantly to win the House. They are favored just barely to win the Senate, but technically that's the binary bet at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
If Democrats, if the crowd is correct and Democrats control Congress, come next January, what does that mean for Kalshi?
We talked to a lot of both sides of the aisle in Congress, and I think the most important thing that we see resonate with a lot of politicians on both sides is really the customer protection side that we talked about. It is how it is better for the end consumer, first of all, to pick what they prefer. We think it's pretty obvious that we have a better model for consumers and for Americans in general. So it's good for that. And then the consumer protection side that we can bring and really bring an alternative in a way better way for consumers to interact with markets, interact with the future, and all of that. So we think actually nothing would change. A lot of the things that you see on
even though some of the prospective bills are, so it seems, and maybe you guys feel differently about this, that current elected members of Congress, it has been more Democrats than Republicans who have at least expressed publicly concerns about prediction markets.
I think that a lot of the bills that you mentioned, I think they're all insider trading related. And I think that Kalshi bans insider trading. We've always banned insider trading since we started the company 7 years ago. And a lot of these things are already legal in the U.S. And I think that actually when we talk about what do we do a lot in Congress, is actually just education of there are offshore prediction markets companies, or onshore prediction market companies. There are laws, for example, we can't list war, assassination, terrorism. Those markets are prohibited. Insider trading is prohibited and all of that. And I think a lot of the bills are coming and kind of trying to reinforce what's already law.
You guys had what, 10.4 billion of volume in February? Am I right about that? Or
March was a little higher, yeah.
Yeah, what was March? That
13, I think.
Yeah, I think that's
12,
right.
13.
So just to give a sense of that 13, ballpark, what percentage of that was sports?
I think it's around 70%.
Yeah, down from 90 plus. I mean, what you're seeing is which is the amazing thing. It's you get critical mass of people. But when you think, if you take a step back, like prediction markets, what is the kind of end goal? Is you want to create critical mass of people that are doing research and investing in these markets, and really hopefully critical mass of the super forecasters, this idea of people that know how to predict the future. And we could talk about those guys in some of our user composition. And as long as you have them, then now you can ask the marketplace any question about the future, and the marketplace could give you an answer.
So let me push on, or not, but let me dig into that a little bit. So let me start. When we began this, I think you talked about just the general value prediction markets and how it can help people make future decisions.
Mm-hmm.
What decision, if the majority of the business is sports, I think it's at 70%, what decision gets helped by Kalshi saying the Celtics are going to beat the Knicks tonight? Who does that help except the people who are explicitly betting on the Celtics and the Knicks?
Well, I think
there's a lot of examples, right? For example, even if you mentioned NBA, right? How many games are there going to be? And if you can buy a game 7 versus not, and all of that. We have, for example, Game Point, which is a sports insurance company trading on these markets.
No, I see how people can make money or not, but
no, we're talking about actual, maybe just we're talking about actual specific hedges, but also the notion, the sports industry is an industry.
It is, but the industry doesn't succeed or fail based on who wins an individual game. It's one of 82.
It actually, there's a lot of tide. I mean, based on who's going to win a Super Bowl. You'd agree with
that's a championship game. That's different. But
then you're making the argument
game of the NBA season.
Yeah, but yes, because you make the argument of this is when you get into should we have options on the stock market, and should we have options on options, and should we have the derivatives products in the stock market?
Not should we. More, is there any actual value to that contract beyond the contract?
Liquidity begets liquidity. The point is if you take out options market, even if you have futures markets, yes, the futures can satisfy most of the hedging utility of the market that is needed. Options can get you more specific, tailored, oftentimes used for speculation. Some of it is used for hedging, but a lot of it is used for speculation. But liquidity in the options market brings liquidity in the futures market. And liquidity is not something that just exists standalone. You have to build a vibrant liquid ecosystem for you to kind of get the result. So the answer is absolutely.
So you're basically saying you need the sports or else the rest of it doesn't necessarily work.
In many ways, I think you need all the categories to interplay with each other. If you just built a market for economic indicators, there wouldn't be enough critical mass to basically build a prediction.
Is there a lot of overlap? In other words, how the reputation, and I know Kalshi has talked about this a bit, trying to get more women onto the platform using it, particularly because sports betting is primarily a male thing historically. Mm-hmm. Do you see that gender split? In other words, when you look at your users, men kind of dominate on the sports side and women tending toward the non-sports things, or is there a lot of cross-pollination?
It's a great question. I think that right now it's over 20, I think it's 28 or almost 30% of our traders are actually women. And I think there's just a lot of different interests. Women are more concentrated in politics and entertainment, and we're seeing, but there is a lot of participation in sports. I think actually economics is a third category, and fourth, I think, comes sports. But I think the whole point of prediction markets that we have, as of this week, the diversity of markets is going to be interesting for diversity of people. And you see actually how more diverse our demographic is, not just on women versus men, but also in a lot of other ways of like income and race, all of those things, because they're different interests. And now you can find a way to actually make money on the things that you care about, which the stock market's very hard to make money. You're trading against Citadel. You're not going to make money trading against Citadel. We both work there. But on Kalshi, you actually have the opportunity to find your edge in trade. And we're really seeing a lot of these other types of the demographics come in.
Does it speak anything? I'm curious, there's been so much talk about prediction markets, not necessarily replacing polls, but certainly supplementing them in a significant way when it comes to politics, particularly, which is what people care usually about polls about. But if the user base isn't necessarily demographically representative of the voter base, does that change that at all? Polls obviously try generally to represent the voting populace.
Can you get back to this question in a second? I was curious. You said there's a reputation. I'm just curious, like the reputation that there's not a lot of women. It's like basically like bros on Kalshi or something like that.
Yeah.
So here's an interesting question. Like, do you think the percentage of women on Kalshi is higher or lower than people that trade options?
I have absolutely no idea.
What is your gut feel?
The way you asked it, I'm going to guess higher.
But it's much higher.
Way higher.
It's like not even comparably higher. So,
yeah.
But when it comes to trading options, it's a purely financially. There's no argument of wisdom of when it comes to something like politics.
No, I hear totally agreed, because the wisdom in options market is set up by a few hedge funds that essentially have kind of like rigged the game against like people. But like to one point, I mean, maybe I want to come back to the poll question, but they're related. But the point is very important. The interesting thing about Kalshi, and yes, sometimes people are going to be like, well, this is speculation, and maybe, like some people are like, maybe this is more like gambling. But that's, again, we talked about this. Every new kind of iteration looks like this. But really what they're talking about is the fact that our set of events, the set of topics that people can participate in is broader.
Yeah.
And it's broader in a way that it relates to and appeals to just like, it's more interesting to more people. Like a lot of people, how many people care or could tell you like, oh, where's this option on S&P is going to land end of day? It's a very small subset of America, but people care about culture, they care about economics, politics, sports. We're providing a mechanism to bring in a much larger set of people in a game that has historically been dominated and rigged by Wall Street. And so maybe on the polls question, just so that that point is kind of like, I just want to like tie the news on the point. You cannot actually predict a lot of these events without that broad participation. If I just let Wall Street, the experts, and there's like Tetlock in 2015, the Super Forecaster book. If I let the experts come and predict politics, they might not even outperform the polls. They might not do a very good job. You need the people in Kansas that are like trading out of their garage. You need, people like that are very diverse, very broad. And you see it in our top 1,000 users on Kalshi, like very dispersed. Small percentage of them have an Ivy League degree. Small percentage of them come from like wealthy income or background. Small percentage of them have actually traded in traditional financial markets or do sports betting. They're just people that know how to read the news and are very self-calibrated. And we're just attracting those people. And that's the most important thing for why this has been so accurate, etc. The last one I'd say is we're not here to replace the polls. There's no word where prediction markets will replace the news or the polls. They all have to kind of work with each other to get us to truth.
Pulling back, and I know you've thought about this and been asked this, how do you think about the bigger picture issue of betting addiction and people who now, because you don't have to walk into a casino, you don't have to find, a bookie in the back corner. Everybody's got a phone in their pocket. Anybody can use Kalshi. And if you are somebody who has an addictive personality, and particularly somebody who doesn't just like sports, likes all sorts of things, has broad interests, that you've enabled them to basically bet on everything and feed that addiction. What do you view your role, your societal role in that is?
I go back to consumer protection. It really is kind of a very important part of our product and how we're viewing things in terms of giving people the tools to trade in a responsible way. So from self-exclusion to deposit limits, like it really is the core of what we're building around this. And for example, if you see notice like any weird behavior, you don't get notifications from us anymore. There's all these things that we do that are important. We obviously believe that things shouldn't be banned, of course not, because of that. I think it's about giving people the tools to do things in a responsible manner. And
But we know some are going to do it irresponsibly, and that you might not be able to detect because you don't realize necessarily that somebody losing $5,000 is life-changing for them.
So I think this is a real concern. So like, I think, and this exists, and I go back, it exists, and you see it in traditional markets. You see it in options, and people lose their house in options sometimes. You see it in crypto. You see it in sports betting and prediction markets. What I will say is that we don't live in a vacuum, okay? So we have all the customer protection measures that Luana have been talking about, and we invest serious efforts and resources into doing that. We try to prevent it, and I think we've done a good job, and over time, I think we're going to do an increasingly better job. I think the thing, though, and when I think about the problem that has arisen, this is way before prediction markets. The problem has started arising, and with a lot of the predatory marketing tactics that are used by the traditional model.
Yeah, right.
Like a model where the profit, the net income on a quarterly basis of that company is equal to the customer's losses. What is that company incentivized to do?
It's to get them to keep betting.
But
no, it's more specific.
Well,
it's to get them to keep losing.
Right.
It's very
well with some winning thrown in because otherwise they won't want to keep
sure, but like
not
the net,
necessarily, you can just give incentives.
Yeah,
right?
if you get,
which
if
is
you're
a
not
lot of
losing
what
your own
they do.
money.
You lose incentive.
Well, the important thing is you need on net.
But someone's always going to lose. I mean, the nature of Kalshi is
but
against
the nature of Kalshi is you're not losing it to Kalshi. Using it
except for the fees.
You're not sure
because if I
we're a business.
But right, you are. But if I break even on Kalshi, if my yeses and nos, I've lost money because I've given you guys.
You've given us some fees. Yes, it's true in financial markets and the stock market. It's true in crypto. I mean, we're a business, to be clear. We're a for-profit company.
I'm just saying it's not the same as me betting with my next door neighbor. And
no, it's not.
If I'm 50-50, I'm 50.
No, you're getting
the difference is when you're on Kalshi, also you have a free market with liquidity, and you're going to have the best possible price. And there isn't one monopoly setting the price based on who you are. Whatever, there's a free market where everyone's competing to get the best price. So you get very, very tight spreads on Kalshi. And the difference is if you're you're betting with your friend, you're not going to get a good price.
We've talked a bunch, or you've both mentioned repeatedly, unregulated versus unregulated markets. And so we've been talking, unregulated has been code for Polymarket, I think, for the most part. I'm going to ask you this, Tarek, specifically. There is a perception that not only are the two companies obviously rivals to a certain extent, even though you're regulated in the U.S. and they're not quite here yet, that you and the founder CEO of Polymarket actively dislike each other personally, beyond the business thing. True?
I don't think so. I think people care more about this than we do. Or I think people like rivalries. They like to,
Yes. So would you like to stoke one? This is your opportunity.
Not really. I mean, I don't really care that much. It's like the honest take. I always thought about this, the Ronaldo and Messi really hate each other. Like, the answer is no. And every time you see them in a place, they just sort of shake hands and they're fine. So I don't think, no. I think the answer is no. I think the thing we think a lot more about is one, I think, by the way, there's a lot of others. There's a lot of others in the space, big brokers like Robinhood. There's exchanges like CME that have been around for tens and hundreds of years. And they're all competing. And I think the net thing of that competition is actually good. We're all getting better. At least Kalshi certainly has gotten better because of competition, And
one thing to flag on the Polymarket side, I think the main thing that they pose to us is a challenge, like an educational challenge of how do we actually differentiate the platforms? How do you actually differentiate the regimes and the products and all of that? And I think that that's kind of most of what it comes from, is that we need to differentiate ourselves to really protect the industry in the U.S.
From a policy regulatory perspective.
Well, which is, I'm curious. Obviously, they've been in a lot of hot water over the last couple of weeks because of a bet that was on there about when bombs were going to start dropping in Iran. What's more likely to happen? Polymarket comes here to the U.S. fully regulated and becomes a significant domestic rival to you guys, or they allow enough of those sorts of bets that politicians try to get rid of all of you in the U.S. and the whole thing moves offshore.
I really hope for the first one.
Well, we hope it's we definitely hope it's the former for sure. But look, I don't really see the second because they're not operating under U.S. law. So a lot of what they're doing is already banned. I mean, they're operating offshore in Panama or other, but the war market or the market on missiles hitting are illegal in the U.S. So what exactly is going to be banned? I mean, it's already banned. So no, what we hope, and I want to talk about the educational challenge. We have to educate people. There's Kalshi and others that are onshore regulated U.S. based, and there's offshore Polymarket and others. They're offshore unregulated, and that's a different business model, and they're doing what they're doing. But I think what we hope over time, and our call is I think everyone should come in the U.S., invest in the regulatory process like we did, and work with regulators to do this in a safe, responsible way, because I think that's the only steady state that makes sense long term.
So one final question for each of you. Give me one current contract, one current bet on Polymarket. Or I'm sorry, wow. One current bet on Kalshi.
That's insulting.
I'm so sorry. That people might not know about, but that you're watching and you're kind of amused by.
Oh, that's a good question.
Well,
There's so many.
I have one. I have
Okay.
so I have one on whether the Citrini outcome
That's a good one.
is going to happen in the next few years. So I don't know if you read the Citrini report, which was this AI doomsday scenario, and they put out that research paper about how this could happen. And Citadel put out a rebuttal saying this is not going to happen. And so we put out a market on that. The reason we put out a market on that is it actually, I mean, those set of views moved the stock market. They moved DoorDash stock. They moved even the S&P to some extent. And this is the power of markets, of prediction markets. Like, instead of listening to pundits, how about we put a market to actually accurately predict this thing, whether this doomsday scenario outcome is going to happen, which will actually make our asset prices more accurate because you have a good source. Like, you price at specific dimensions that people.
Do you know what the yes/no is on that right
So
now?
it was, when we first launched it, it was at 15%. It's actually at 30% now.
15% doomsday, basically.
Yeah, and now it's at 30%. So I've been tracking that market because it's like, this is such an important market. Like, if this is really where we're heading, we need to like think very critically about how we're gonna like figure out the job displacement, etc. I don't think this scenario personally is gonna happen, but that's the beauty of prediction markets. You don't have to listen to me.
Yeah.
You should listen to the market.
So I'll say one of my favorite markets, but then I'll say a fun fact I learned today, actually. For me, one of my favorite markets is always Taylor Swift related. I just love Taylor Swift, so all of them are great. But a market that's growing, one of the fastest growing markets on Kalshi right now is actually on the tech layoffs. And how many tech layoffs are going to be this year. And they're growing, like the volume in this market is growing like over 20% week over week. And I think it's just so interesting to see.
I assume that's not related to Taylor Swift, right? Is she causing
No,
this?
not related to Taylor Swift.
Maybe related to AI.
Yeah, it's more related to AI.
To Citrini.
One is for I follow for fun, and the other one is like when new albums and all the things. But the tech layoffs one is really, really growing a lot of interest. So,
But I think it's an important market
it's
because
an
people
important-
should know and position accordingly. And like, there's an interesting question about like how people should like think about their jobs and what should they do when going to school and studying in college, etc. I think those markets are very important.
Tarek, Luana, thank you so much for joining
Thanks a
the Axios
lot.
Show.
Thank you so much.